Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Boom Boom Room. I'm your host, Ray Mancini. We have a very, very special interview right now. For me, this gentleman is one of the pillars of rock and roll in the 60s, early 70s for me, but in the 60s specifically when I was growing up, listening to a lot of his music. I have an older brother, an older sister that were playing it quite a bit throughout the house. So I got to know his songs even as a young man. The very gracious, and I'm so happy to be talking to Mitch Ryder.
Yeah.
Mitch, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us.
You.
And so, Mitch, now, going back, you were born and raised in Michigan, correct?
Absolutely. Spent most of my life here.
And you're back there now. That's where you're at now.
And I returned here. We were living in Georgia, and the climate was just wonderful. That move back here is really the only thing that I'm resentful of.
Yeah.
I mean, the deep freeze.
Yeah. Well, Mitch, I was out in California for 30 years. And when I moved back in 2014, and I hadn't spent a full winter in 30 years. And the winter of 2015 was the worst in 40. So lucky me, right? So it took a little getting used to again. But you started your first band called Tempest when you were in high school? Your first band was man, how about that? You were in high school already singing, doing your thing.
Well, prior to that, I had started my own solo career. At the age of 16, I released my first record.
Wow.
On a gospel label in Detroit. And then in high school, we tried to form a band called The Tempest. And it was short-lived because the wannabe keyboard player, his mother would not let him trade in his accordion for a keyboard, so the band broke up.
His accordion. Yeah. Well,
right.
Oh, that's funny.
And so then I was working solo in some urban clubs, mostly black clubs in the city of Detroit. And I became a member of an all-black group. Every week there would be a different backup band. And the reason the club owners did that is because they would tell the backup band, this weekend is your audition for the job. And then after they auditioned them, they'd fire them and then hire in another. They never had to pay a band to back up anybody.
Oh, man.
But it is where I met three of the key members of the group that would become the Detroit Wheels. And I pulled in one of my buddies from junior high, Joe Kubert, to round out the group. And that was the group that went to New York and had the success with Bob Crew.
Wow.
And that's also the group that broke up after 3 years. And it was mostly, I was trying to get out of my management contract with Bob Crew as opposed to doing what I needed to do, which was to sue him for the $7.5 million that it's estimated was stolen from us. So we took that all the way up to the Supreme Court in New York, and I lost, of course, because I didn't have the finances or the connections to end the. He ended up then taking my contract and selling it to Paramount Records.
Wow.
And we recorded a couple of things on Paramount, the Detroit album, the Detroit-Memphis Experiment, which I'm proud of. That was with Booker T and the MGs.
M13, wow.
And then a whole... We went then to Europe, and we appeared on a multi-country, Europe. All of Europe was covered by this. They had something like 300 million viewers, and it was called the Rock Palace. And based on that performance and original material that wasn't written by Bob Crew, I gathered a following in 1979 that has lasted until, I'm touring again in February, March, and we have toured every year since 79 for 2 months, with the exception of the 1 year that was killed by COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of brings us up to date, except for the material. There's been 21 CDs, about 15 of them were studio albums cut in Europe. The rest were live recordings. I was there for 17 years with mostly American groups, and then I made a switch and got an all-German band for the last 30 years. So then I found a German record company that wanted to sign me very badly. And we put out a double vinyl LP, which is basically the material I'm going to be doing on the package show that I'm involved in. And we just finished this week recording a studio album produced by Don Was.
Nice.
That is one hot piece of music. And
well, you had a really bad label experience, but then you had a really good one because I know you were a huge fan of Thomas Roof, and this show coming in, this celebration at the Robbins Theater on Friday, November 8th. Tell us about why you love Roof Records so much and why Thomas Roof means a lot to you.
He was willing to. I had been signed to two. Prior to my contract with Mr. Roof, I had been signed to two different German labels, and they weren't able to do what Thomas has been able to do, and that is he's been able to consistently put his artists on American charts, basically in the blues charts.
Yeah,
and so that's different than the Hot 100, of course, but I never thought of myself as a blues artist, although I knew that I was capable of doing it. And so this is where I find myself right now, promoting the double vinyl album and preparing to figure out how to launch the studio recording. And I've got a tour in November, the one you're talking about. And then I've got a 2-month tour in Europe in February, March. I've got a new booking agent and a new manager, and we've got a summer of work following that. So I'm staying as busy as I can.
You've influenced so many rockers of the 70s, 80s, and into now. But the guys like Bob Seger, who was, when I was growing up and I was in high school, in the 70s, his music was what I listened to, his, Mellencamp, John Cougar Mellencamp, and of course, Bruce Springsteen. It's got to be a heck of a tribute to you that your music has influenced these people in so many ways.
It's an honor, of course. I look back at the people that when they ask me the same question, who my influences were,
right?
And I'm very consistent with my answers, and it really comes down to three people: James Brown, Little Richard, and oddly enough, Hank Williams. And Hank Williams is the result of the fact that my mother was from Tennessee, and when I was a baby growing up, all she would do all day long was sing Hank Williams songs.
Nice.
So I got my share of those. But there's something good about them. And I'm not quite sure how I incorporated those into my music, because my music with the hits in America were basically a mixture of rhythm and blues and rock and roll. And now I find myself in more of a mix of blues and rock and roll. But when I was having my hits, we had three magazines that charted records, and it ended up that Billboard won the top spot and kicked everybody else out that was competing to do that.
Right.
Those were important, but it was a different time, and it was right at the cusp of. I'll give you a good example. Aretha Franklin. She was the first person from Detroit to get $10,000 for one performance.
Mm-hmm.
And our experience, we were working in upstate New York, in Mancini, New York, at a little club. And we were getting paid $1,500 for 6 days of work, 3 shows a day.
Man.
And my manager called on the phone and said, "Hey, you're leaving tomorrow. You're going on tour." Just like that. And darn, the first place we played was in Pittsburgh, called the Red Rooster.
Oh yeah.
And they paid us $1,500 for 1 half-hour show, which we had just the week prior to that worked 6 days a week, 3 shows. I couldn't believe it. And every hit we had, the money got bigger. And then, of course, we had to battle the British invasion, which was a big break for them because in the beginning it was just about accents and haircuts. They weren't really doing original music at that point. Most of the opening British artists that came to America were doing covers of very important American black blues artists. And so I applaud them for that, for taking that segment of our musical history and elevating it to the consciousness of the white public.
It's a fact. I mean, when the Rolling Stones first came over, and I'm glad you brought up the British invasion. When the Stones first came over, they wanted to meet Muddy Waters and John Lee Hooker and, all of these folks that we kind of forgot about as Americans. And the next thing you know, they were all opening for them on their tours. And they really got a huge white audience out of nothing. They were playing little, shotgun shacks. And the next thing you know, they were opening up for the Stones. Mitch, one of my big questions is you're, to me, one of the ultimate front men. And we were just talking about the Stones, Mick Jagger, Mitch Ryder. What makes a great front man?
Wow, what a question. I can only tell you my experience when I get on stage. I can't tell you what makes a good front man. But if I'm on stage and I'm connecting with the audience and I'm making them happy and I'm bringing back memories to them and they're applauding and they're asking for encores, then I've done my job.
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you that there's a certain dance step or a presence on the stage. There must be some kind of presence that has some effect on it, but I can't identify it.
Yeah.
But I think when you stand out there and just do a damn good show and give it everything you got, that's what makes a good front man.
You were talking about James Brown, and I say the same thing about you. Everybody is ready for a Mitch Ryder scream.
Oh, you should have been at my last surgery.
Did you get to write any of your own music during that time?
I began my career writing my own music,
mm-hmm.
and that continued on with the group that was the Detroit Wheels.
Mm-hmm.
But once we got to New York, Mr. Crew was kind of old school, and he had cubicles in his office in which he installed writers, and each room had a keyboard, and that's where he put his writers. And then it was very much similar to Stax. And every day, if he had an artist that didn't have material, he'd go into these rooms and see what his writers had written. And he would not accept any songs that he did not control 100%.
Yeah.
And so he dissuaded at a very important time when the British groups were being compelled to write their own songs. He was dissuading us from even attempting to do that.
Wow.
Because he wanted to own everything.
Yeah.
And that was not untypical for those days.
No,
in fact,
wasn't.
Getting ripped off wasn't untypical. But times change, And we were talking about the British effect on black music. You're quite right. These black artists were playing in little clubs with maybe 100 people if they were lucky. And these hot, 5,000, 10,000 people British groups would do their material and eventually bring them to light to the point where they would open for them. This was a part of our racist history when we had black radio and white radio. But that, of course, thanks to people like yourself, has changed. And I think it was a necessary change. And I don't think that's a political statement. I just think it's a cultural statement.
Yeah, it is a fact.
Mitch, I got to remind our audience that, ladies and gentlemen, we're listening. We're talking to a very special guest, Mitch Ryder of Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels, who will be performing Friday, November 8th, a week from Friday, at the Robbins Theater in Warren, Ohio. It's a celebration of Roof Records. 30th anniversary tour, and Mitch will be headlining that.
And I'm leaving tomorrow because it's a long walk.
That's for sure. That's for sure. But obviously, you always hear people talk about as they get older, the voice has maturity to it. It gives it nuances to the voice. Now, do you notice that for yourself?
Well, yeah.
You always had that gravelly voice. You had that growl, But
I can just demonstrate it for you. This talking voice is what I would call an older man's voice. But when I'm on stage, then it changes into
Oh, Mike, that was cool.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was cool, man.
Well, as you
there's the performance voice, and then there's the conversation voice.
Exactly. The instrument. You have your instrument.
That was cool.
And you take care of your instrument, right? Friday, November 8th at the Robbins Theater. It's Mitch Ryder headlining a celebration of the 30th anniversary of Roof Records. Samantha Fish is supposed to be a headline with special guest, Mitch Ryder. Nah, she's the special guest for you. That's all, man. With me, you're the headliner, man. Come on now.
All right. I don't know what your listening audience is in numbers, but we don't want to tell her this.
No. Samantha, I got nothing but love for you. I don't know. But Mitch, look, we're planning on being there on November 8th and checking you out.
Make yourself known.
I will, definitely. I definitely will. I look forward to meeting you in person, shaking your hand. And
thank you, Ray.
But again, ladies and gentlemen, wonderful person and great musician, Mitch Ryder.
Thank you.